conservation and development for the town of Manchester. I'm Eric Kraus, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's some other members of the commission that are here tonight. Carlos Jusen is here, and Teresa Ike is here, and Vice Chairman Patrick Kennedy is also here tonight. So thank everyone for coming. It's a pleasure to have you all here tonight to really share in this important moment that we have for our community. This plan represents months of hard work and collaboration from many individuals and organizations within our town. We're excited to share our vision for the future of Manchester with you tonight. The plan provides a roadmap for responsible and sustainable development within our community while ensuring that we preserve our natural resources and cultural heritage. Our draft plan reflects a collaborative effort from many stakeholders and community members who contributed their time, their expertise, and their perspectives into this process. We're very grateful for everyone's contributions, and we believe the plan we're talking about tonight represents our shared visions that reflect the best interests of our community. Before we begin our presentation tonight, I wanted to recognize and thank some of the individuals who have contributed significantly to this important project. We do have to thank first and foremost the members of the Town of Manchester's Planning Department and Gary's team. Thank you for your tireless efforts at spearheading the development of this plan, your commitment to community engagement, and the thoughtful consideration of the town's needs have been very influential in guiding the direction of this document. I'd also like to extend gratitude to the consultants that are here from PPUDC, Brian and Anna, who came all the way from North Carolina to be with us today. Nashville. Oh, I'm sorry, North Carolina. Thank you for lending your expertise and guidance on this project. Your contributions have really helped develop a comprehensive and thoughtful plan that balances the needs of our community while making sure that we are responsible with conservation and our development practices. And finally, I'd like to recognize all the community members and stakeholders that came out to be part of this process, offering their insights and feedback along the way. Your input has been very invaluable in this process to everyone that participated in our workshops that we had last fall. We thank you for your commitment to the future of the town of Manchester. We hope that today's presentation will provide you a better understanding of the goals and the strategies for the next decade. We encourage you to share your thoughts and ideas with us tonight and along the way. And together we can help to create a sustainable and prosperous future for the town of Manchester. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to getting your feedback. I'll introduce Gary Anderson, who's the Director of the Planning Department in town. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Eric. All right, I'm going to be brief. Eric already welcomed everybody, so I don't have to do that, but I did want to recognize a couple of people that are here. The town manager, Steve Stefano's taking a picture of me right now.
Yes, I am. Smile.
Tim Bacchus, Director of Public Works. I know Dennis Shane is here. Board. If any other board members are here, would they raise their hand? I'm sure they'll be trickling in. But we thank them for their support of this work, and they're going to get a bird's eye view of this plan as well pretty soon. This night is a long time coming. This is a long planning process. We've taken a year or so to get to where we are today. So thanks for everybody that's participated in the past, and thanks for being here tonight. It's really hard, as you might know, at this point in time to get people interested in things and get the word out about things that are important. We think this is important, and we're glad that you think it's important too. It's a really important document for the community. I do want to mention that this is a draft. Okay, everybody say draft. Draft, thank you. So it's not a final document, right? But it is available online as we speak through the town's website on Your Voice Matters. If you scan one of the QR codes that's on the postcard, you can go right to Your Voice Matters, or we can direct you afterwards. Our team is going to send an email out tomorrow directing you how to access that as well. So it's a draft, remember that. The goal here is for this to be a community plan. Eric touched on that previously. We've done this plan a little bit differently than we've done past plans, right? We've tried different things, ways to engage people that we haven't tried before. We've asked people to host informal discussions with their friends around the dining room table, or the living room, or the coffee shop, places they're comfortable. We attended things like the Spruce Street Farmers Market, attended Juneteenth events, went to various commissions, went to Manchester High School, did a lot of different things this time around. So yes, it's different than we did last time, but whether they have been super successful or maybe just a little bit successful, we thought it was worth trying something new. So that's part of this plan as well. One note that this plan is not about specific projects, right? So this is a 10-year vision for where the town wants to be in 10 years. You can see some posters up here about different districts in town. You can see a bunch of recommendations, and you'll hear about those from Brian. But it's not going to touch on things about specific buildings or specific development projects. So if you want to hear about those things, I'm happy to talk to you about them afterwards. If you don't hear anything about it up here, might not be in the plan, or you're welcome to talk to one of our staff people. Megan Pilla in the back there is a planner in our department, and Emma Peterson, pretty new to our department as well in the back there, so thanks for all the work that you ladies have done today and throughout the process. And that's it. So without further ado, straight from Nashville, Tennessee, I believe, right? All right. We welcome Brian from TPUC. Please give him a round of applause.
All right, it's good to be back. It's been a little while since I was here last. So tonight, kind of as Gary just alluded to, there are more things that I'm not going to say than I am going to say, if that makes sense. A lot of times when we do a presentation where we're introducing a document, when we get to the Q&A portion, it's a series of, well, I didn't hear you talk about this. Why didn't you put that in the plan? Or where is that in the plan? Or what page should I look at? So this isn't that presentation, right? So what we want you to do is to this is like a teaser, right? We want you to get excited about the plan so that you'll go out and download it, and then you'll search, Control F on the keyboard, by the way. It pulls up the find. And you can search for all of the things that you're passionate about and you want to know. What does the plan say about this thing or that thing or the other? So what I'm going to do is just give a high-level overview of what's in the plan, so I'll give you an orientation to it so you know how to use it and those kinds of things. And then we'll have a conversation and we'll answer as many high-level questions as we can. So, I'm having clicker problems tonight here. There we go. All right, so I get to stand up here and talk to all of you at the different various presentations and different events and things, but we have a big team of people who've been working on this plan. So we have specialists for dealing with transportation and traffic, and we have sustainability and economics, and then maybe most importantly, Anna, who's over here, has been the project manager for this and has really just kept the whole thing moving forward and just done tons of writing, and so I get to stand up and do all the fun stuff. But I think she thinks that this isn't the fun part, and so that's why we work well together. So,
It did.
Oh, it did. There we go.
Point it at the computer.
Yes, there we go. Okay, this isn't awkward at all. So, for how many first timers do we have in the room? People who have, okay, great. So I'm going to do a little bit of catching up for you, and having small anxiety attacks when the screen goes black like that. It's our scary to a presenter. So we started with the community kickoff, then we sort of moved into analysis and sort of collecting and preparing to come and bring our team here. So we have the Planapalooza that I'll show more information about in a minute. After the Planapalooza, we went away and started to figure out where were the holes in the data, what were things we need to learn more about based on what we heard from the community. And then we started drafting the first draft of the plan, which was the client draft. So what we always do is we pull together a draft, we say, okay, staff, and it's just like not very nice looking, it's mostly just the words, right? You say, staff, read this, make sure we haven't missed anything, there's nothing crazy in here. And so they did that for us, so it was great. And then we set out to produce the public draft document, which is what we're here to unveil and present tonight. So we are here in the timeline. So, but we've been at this for a while, and it's been a great process. We've really enjoyed getting to know the community. One of the things we also did that's not on the timeline, but we've been going throughout, is have a web page up so that people could go online and not just get information about what's happening and look at what's been done, but actually give feedback, since we know not everybody wants to or can come to events like this, and so we went through that process. The community kickoff, as I mentioned, was back in the days where we were all virtual, and so we did our best to get the word out and had people. It was a pretty good turnout for a Zoom meeting, and people came, and some were in person, some were in Zoom, and we went through and sort of introduced, here's what's happening, what's coming in the future. Then we had these on-the-table sessions where we created this packet of information so that people could self-host an event with friends, family, coworkers, whatever. But it allowed us to basically get into people's homes in a way that you can't by just inviting people to events like this. And so they would go through the exercise and they would fill out information or questions and prompts and things. And so we were able to take all that information from the people who participated in that and start to put that into the thinking process as we went. We had surveys that the staff put together and distributed, and one of the things that I can't stress enough is how sort of above and beyond the planning staff went around here. Many times when we're working on projects around the country, we they're just kind of like, hey, you do it, you guys go. And we're just, well, it's not that easy because we're not from here, right? And so we did all the things that we normally do to get people to participate and provide those opportunities, and then they added to it. So it's been amazing. We're super thankful for that. But we had the Planapalooza was the big event, right? And it happened in here. And at the Planapalooza, we started off with a presentation where we talked about general ideas, best practices, and planning, and all the things we've heard and learned so far through the earlier phases. And my whole team came. We actually set up our office here. And we had a big table in the middle here. And we would have different technical meetings. We had 7 different meetings with different topics. And all this was open to the public. Anyone could come and drop in, participate. And each of those technical meetings had experts in different fields from either around here or regional experts that could help and weigh in on what the realities were. And so we went through that process, and then people could just drop in whenever they wanted to and talk to the design team or my team members and experts we brought with us. So we got a lot of great information through that process. And the images and plans and things that you see around the room, and that I'll show you some about here in a minute, were all generated during that. It was like, what, 5 days? 5 days? And so we were working very quickly, and to Gary's point earlier, while there are specific drawings on specific areas of the town, it is not intended to be a proposal for what should happen there. It's just illustrating the ideas and concepts that we heard from the community and participants. So, overview, so this is the cover. This is what it looks like. Luckily, you are photogenic. There was one community we worked in not too long ago, and it was a real challenge to find images to include of the local existing context. They were not photogenic, but you guys are. So it's broken down. There's a table of contents, obviously, and it starts to lay out the different sections, the chapters or elements. There's a user's guide at the beginning, and that's really important. So make sure you read the user's guide. It talks about sort of how to use this document, what's the sort of appropriate way to approach it, because sometimes when people pick up a plan like this, maybe the first time they've ever looked at a plan of conservation development, sometimes called a comprehensive plan elsewhere, but it's the first time they've looked at something so comprehensive, and it seemed like a lot. And so this kind of helps you understand what it is, what it does, and how it does it. There is a set of core values, and these were all developed through our process. So things that we heard from the community, and then they were vetted as we went out. So I will read these to you. So promote inclusivity, balance conservation and growth, enhance connections, expand housing opportunities, preserve character and authenticity, build to endure, and strengthen economic diversity. And so basically these core values become the foundation upon which the rest of the plan is built. And so you'll see as we go through the plan that these are referenced as we go. So There's an introductory section, and the way that each section is set up, there's a topic that is the chapter, so this is housing there. And then you'll start to see that there are these state growth management principles that are important for plan conservation development. So we've keyed it to those so everybody knows how to find those. And then the core values that I just mentioned, the little icons for them are represented. So you can see that this chapter covers those various core values. Then we have definitions of some key concepts that are, just helpful kind of as you go, rather than flip to the end and look at some, glossary or something. And then there are some case studies throughout the plan, so that as we say, well, here's something you could do, this is an idea, recommendation for the future, we say, oh, well, and here's a place that's done something similar, so it can either be inspiration or sometimes maybe a cautionary tale. And then in each the different elements, we have a call-out box that essentially starts to talk about the equity and sustainability elements of that, because that was so important in the process. And what we heard from the community, and kind of we thought it was important to call those things out specifically. So the other thing is we have the within each of the different sections what we heard. And from our process, if you participated in that, we try to, even though there are times when I have to stand up and talk like this and do a presentation, we try to just have conversations and listen, and we're taking notes all the time and jotting everything down. And so what we want to do is represent, what we heard through the process and have that actually within the document. And then the recommendations, the idea would be for recommendations to be tied to the things that we heard. And so what you actually can see here, and these are, again, there are so many recommendations throughout the plan, I don't want to read them all to you because you'll all fall asleep. Not that they're not exciting, but there's just a lot, right? But here on this slide, we've shown how what we've heard from the community specifically ties to some of the recommendations. And so it's kind of a fun way to go back and test it. Some of the things, some of the recommendations are much higher level, and so they don't necessarily respond directly back to what we heard. Some things were generated through the process of, kind of the data collection and understanding, and not just from what we heard from the citizens. But you start to see when you go through it, it's pretty neat. And this is the first time we've actually ever done this, to go back and draw the arrows and try to connect it up. But we're going to do this from now on for all of our projects, because I think it's meaningful to the community to see like, oh, that's nice, that's what we said. And then like, oh, here's what happened based on what we said. And this is an interesting one too. You can start to see there's some data points that came up through the process where, you guys were either extraordinary in some topic, or you were, kind of not scoring well. And so we made a recommendation based on that as well. So there's some data points in here too. So the chapters are set up. We have the community profile, which basically explains, the community from a data perspective, and sometimes a qualitative perspective as well as quantitative. But if you like the charts and graphs and things, this is the section for that. And we try to make it as user-friendly as possible. So if you don't like the charts and graphs, you'll still want to look at this, and it's accessible to you. So the first element then after that would be the economics and employment chapter, and it goes through, and again, I'm not going to read all these to you, but just so you have a visual of them. We wanted to, and hopefully you can tell, make the document as visually appealing as possible, so that you want to pick it up, that you want to look at it, you want to read it. I don't know if you've looked at other plans before, but a lot of times it's literally just like the most boring thing ever, even though it's talking about the most important thing ever, which is like the future of your community and where you're going. And so for us, our badge of honor is when somebody says, I picked up the plan and I read the whole thing this weekend. Wow. And I don't mean the planning staff, I mean like a normal citizen who doesn't do this for a living, right? They're normal too. So public services, community and cultural resources, elements. This was a great one because you actually have a lot going on as far as the community and cultural resources. And so we were trying to go through and look at all the different organizations and groups that are doing things around the community. And there's a lot. In some cases, we listed them out for certain things, but surely we have not covered them all. So if your group isn't named in there, don't fret. Then a transportation section, which is vitally important. We heard lots about transportation, and because we're set up with our office here, we had to see the cars whizzing by out here in the traffic when there was traffic, and so that was helpful for us to experience it. Then the Parks and Recreation chapter, full of wonderful things. You guys have done a nice job in that realm as well. And when we had meetings about Parks and Recreation, we were like, oh, what about this? Oh yeah, we've already just recently done a plan and talked about that, or we thought of that, we're doing that. Oh, wow, this is great. And then land use and community character chapter is kind of the, from our perspective, one of the most important, because this is really where you start to lay things out from a colors on the map kind of perspective. And so we have what we call our conservation and growth framework. And so the idea is where you want to grow, where you want to conserve, and how you want to grow in those different areas. So it's not as, you don't necessarily think about it as like what use you want here versus what use you want there as much. Uses are a part of the discussion, but it's not the main priority. And so as we go through, you'll see that the different colors are all keyed to these explanations within the map. So these different sectors, we call them. So the first sector is this dark green sector. It's the preserved conservation. So these are areas that actually are preserved and are protected. And I think a lot of times in communities that have done a nice job and have a good bit of green around, they think that more is protected than actually is. And so this is always a helpful graphic to see. The next sector is the reserved conservation sector. So it's areas that don't have that much development that maybe you should consider getting in conservation somehow, but not necessarily. And some of them are just large lot houses as well. The limited growth sector is the gray, so these are low to medium density neighborhoods. And really the idea would be, sorry, it's the light yellow, my bad. We get confused with this one because the gray on the around the title there. So it's the light yellow. And the idea there is these are sort of your neighborhoods that are stable, nobody's in the neighborhood going, oh, we really wish we could get some infill in our neighborhood, or things will be different, or whatever. And so the idea is that mostly to remain as is. And so over time, a lot of these neighborhoods actually start to say like, well, actually it would be kind of nice to see some different things happen here, but they're all sort of new enough, if you will, that you don't typically see much call for growth. So the next one is the neighborhood infill sector. So that is the orange. And so those are the sort of neighborhoods that are in and around the more of the core of the city, and looking for opportunities to have infill. One of the things we heard lots about was we want to provide more housing options, have a wider variety of housing types. We want to increase some density in some areas, and so these tend to be areas that have over time have always done this, but they lend themselves to that because there's already a pretty wide variety of housing types in some of these areas. So it's kind of nice. Then the neighborhood corridor infill is the pink. So this is along the different corridors throughout town. There's a couple of locations there, and typically it's connecting different neighborhoods. And also we have there's low intensity commercial. So those areas tend to be good opportunities for what we call suburban retrofit, where you take sort of underutilized commercial properties that developed in a conventional suburban sprawl kind of pattern, and look for opportunities to infill within their parking lots and transform it so that they start actually adding character to the community rather than just being completely utilitarian and something that you probably wouldn't put on a postcard. The retrofit areas are somewhat similar to that, but they are larger scale. So the mall area. These are the dark pink areas on the map. So the mall is a good example of that, and some of the other areas along corridors where it's not just sort of a sliver of land. There's actually a good bit of land that, say is available, but it's usually owned by multiple people. It probably doesn't have a for sale sign on it, but from a purely planning perspective and showing opportunities for doing something new and transformative, these are areas that tend to lend themselves to that. And then the center infill growth area is the purple, and so that's an historic downtown and the old North End Depot Square area as well. And so there you really want to focus on preserving and protecting the historic structures and things that are part of the community character, and then infilling appropriately as people are interested in that. And then we have a couple of areas that, like we have this area that's called the Innovation Park Special District. And so this is really trying to think about, rather than having more conventional office park or whatever, could you do something different with that? Can it, but right now it's the existing business park. And so a lot of those things will stay the same for a while, but a lot of them are redeveloping because they developed in a model that's not really all that desirable anymore from a worker's perspective or a post-COVID perspective, because office and other things are somewhat struggling. So the idea in those areas is you start to incorporate other uses. So you actually bring residential in, so people who are working there can actually live there, and some really cool kind of things can happen in that regard. And then the Cheney Special District, and really looking at the mills and all of them. It's so cool over there, so unique, and it's already been doing its own thing, but it didn't sort of neatly fit into another category, and so we kind of called it out on its own in a special way. There's the Campus Special District as well, which is the teal color, and so that's a community college, and so more of a campus vibe going on there. And then the Industrial Special District, so this is, as you can imagine, industrial areas, industrial parks, but a lot of places these days are actually doing something similar to what the business parks are doing, where they're transforming their old industrial areas into something that is a bit more mixed use and is a bit more cutting edge. So let's say they may have made widgets and other things, and now they're moving into biotech and whatever, and sort of reinventing themselves. And so, but a lot of places just sort of stay as they are because there's generating good tax revenue, so that's okay. So we have these what we call focus areas, and as I said at the beginning, and I'll say again, these are not intended to say, go do this on this property. So first and foremost, if you own any of the properties that we've taken liberties with, just be inspired or be grateful that free planning work was done on your property. You don't have to go do any of this. But what you'll see when you start reading the plan is how a lot of the recommendations that are contained within the plan in the different sections are illustrated in these planning concepts. And so you kind of sync them up and link them together. So it's really just like, okay, these are good spots to show it. And sometimes when we draw these things, there is an inspirational element to it. When we were working in Burlington, Vermont, we were doing their downtown master plan. And if you've been to Burlington, or several years ago I'd been to Burlington, there was a sort of suburban style mall in the historic downtown that took up 3 blocks of what used to be Little Italy, and it cut the streets off, and you couldn't get around it. It took like 20 minutes to walk around to get up to Church Street, and you go through it, which was not the best experience to get to Church Street. So, being wild planners that we were, we said, well, what if we actually redevelop that mall, we punch the streets back through, we turn the mall inside out so the shops are facing on the street again, we added residential uses above, and it was so wild that even the planning department was like, I don't know, we probably shouldn't show that in the plan because people are just going to discredit the whole plan. It's so wacky. Well, we talked them into letting us leave it in the plan, and no one had to go do it. But 3 months after the plan was adopted, the mall was sold, and the new owner got a hold of the downtown master plan, was flipping through it, and sees the mall that they owned, and they said, whoa, this is what they want to have happen here? You mean we could do all this? Wow, that's really cool. And so they set about to do it. And so if you've been to Burlington recently, there's a big hole in the ground, and they've been working on redoing it all and whatever. Then everybody who had visual squatters' rights of the lake from their penthouses on the top floor were freaked out, and so they got into some lawsuits about it. But nonetheless, the idea stood. So with all those caveats and disclaimers, I'm going to show you our focus areas. So this is a map just showing the different areas we looked at. So Spencer Street, Depot Square, and the Hop River Innovation Park, Midtown Wellness District, and Buckland Hills. So this is Spencer Street before, or as it is now, I should say. And so there's going to be conventional shopping with large parking lots outside it, a speedy highway here, various mix of uses and apartments and other things. And so we showed how you could infill within this area. So the light pink buildings are the existing structures. And then we've created a streetscape along Spencer Street so that it's actually a pleasant walking experience. Typically when you do this, you don't want to just have good buildings pulled up to the street with storefronts and things. You actually want to do a road diet as well. So the road gets kind of civilized a bit, so you could feel comfortable walking along it. But we started to show how you could take a conventional suburban development and infill and totally transform it into something that feels more like a village or a place you'd want to do more than just shop. Then we looked at Depot Square and the Hop River Innovation Park. So this is the existing condition. And then we showed actually, initially we were thinking of them as two different areas. We realized they're really close to one another, and the trail goes kind of along the way there. And so we started trying to conceptualize them as one area together. So this is some infill happening, some emphasizing of civic spaces and transformation of some areas. So this is in the Innovation Park, just some large-scale buildings here. There's stormwater features and things that are very functional, but that's about the most you can say about them. And so we thought, well, what if this became an actual place where if you worked in some of these buildings or nearby, or there was some residential added along the trail, that you actually had a center, community center here. So there's some mixed use shown, commercial areas. We've incorporated sustainable stormwater techniques to make those swales and ditches be able to be part of something that feels nice. And did some crosswalks and all this. So just a few small changes can make a big difference. Another area we looked at was around the hospital. So we call this the Midtown Wellness District. So a lot of places, they have a hospital. The hospital was built, and it was more just like, oh, we're so happy to have a hospital, and the hospital just does whatever it wants. Builds a big building, and a lot of times it takes out neighborhoods, and they have big parking lots and all that. It's totally normal, and that's the way people do it. Well, now there's a sort of a mindset change that's happened where hospitals aren't focusing so much on the actual really sick patients. There's a whole idea of wellness and how they can be part of that. And so even like the insurance industry is changing to focus on wellness. So they actually go to the doctor as the last step, but everybody can make money along the way. So what we've tried to do is show how to create a wellness district that incorporates concepts of wellness. We've shown infill around the hospital, which is the dark building there in the middle. There's existing homes that are around it, and so we started to show how you could actually be a better neighbor. So we have some residential uses around that are facing those houses. We've added some parking structures so you can actually take the land that was surface parking and do other things with it. We've added community gardens and various placemaking elements, trails, walking trails, and all that. And so everything is really focusing on health. So you can grow food in the community garden, and then they can, in some of the restaurants and things that we've added, they can actually serve dishes that were made with the things from the garden. And then you can go walk it off on the trail around the area there. And so that's kind of exciting to think about. So this is the hospital as it looks now. You can see it there. And then, along the road here, there's parking lots hanging out, and it's kind of the corner. I think this is the drugstore, and so there's all just very conventional suburban things that have happened there for the years, so that they put parking up front. And so we started to show not only how you could impact around the hospital, but also just small moves like adding what we call liner buildings along the blank walls of the drugstore. So here's the entrance to the drug. You guys see my cursor over there on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. So here's the entrance to the drugstore, and then these liner buildings could have various uses. Now we've got a nice little green out here, a plaza out here. Buildings are pulled up to the street. We have infill lining the parking lot. We have the parking structures with the residential units facing the neighborhood, the community gardens, all the things that I just talked about in the plan are shown here in a way that hopefully is instructive and inspirational for future growth and development. And then there was the mall. So many places that we work around the country have their struggling malls. And for us, it's always fun when we see, oh, look, they got a mall, because they're like the most underutilized piece of property, right? They build these parking lots for like the day after Christmas, gigantic. Not many people are shopping at the malls these days anymore, unfortunately, and so there's lots of room for change. And so we studied them all, and we realized that there are beautiful views off the bluff up here that, just sort of one of the most prominent locations in the community. And so we started to show how you could have infill in the parking lot areas, adding structured parking, residential, lining these. So the parking's always in the rear or in the mid-block, so you don't see the parking all the time. And, having residential here, get these amazing views off, so this becomes really desirable. You got the hotels that are there already. We have this whole mixed-use core around here. We've added some liners on the front of the mall. This is the mall entrance now. This is the entrance to Dick's. And so this whole area becomes this amazing mixed-use vital district on this side. I think I called it the mullet plan. So this is like a party in the front, business in the front, party in the back, right? So in the back here, there was so much land that we just thought, well, if we showed development all the way around, that's maybe unrealistic for the market. It's like 200 years worth of growth could be contained within your mall parking lot. Thank you. Hopefully it's not just me. So we thought, well, we've heard about wanting to be more sustainable, wanting to have a smaller carbon footprint and all that. So on the back side of the mall, where the views aren't quite as splendid, we started showing agricultural areas. So this is pretty large-scale farming that's happening back here, and even in areas where we still kept parking lots, like we're showing orchards, amongst the parking spaces. And then, one of the participants that came to the Planet Plaza said, there isn't really a good indoor track and field facility within the nearby region, and so maybe we could put something like that up there. And I said, okay, yeah, that sounds great. There's hotels, because people go apparently for tournaments and meets and all that, and so they travel from all around. And so, they're coming and generating tax revenue, and they're coming to an exciting place now. They're staying in the hotels, hanging out in this district. Then it's time to wake up tomorrow and go to your track meet. So this is the track and field facility. We just took the footprint of one that they said was a great one. I can't remember where it was. And then we also had enough room to do an outdoor track and field facility amongst our agriculture. And, but it could have been anything, right? We picked that track and field because somebody had a good idea. So let's see what it looks like. But the idea is, here's kind of what it could look like. And so So here's the entrance to the mall right now, and here's the entrance to Dick's. And so, to what?
It's not Bob's, believe it or not. It's not Dick's anymore, it's now Bob's.
Oh, sorry. Time flies.
Yeah, right. It'll be Joe's soon.
Yeah, see, I did that on purpose, right? I just made the point that the mall needs help, right? But nonetheless, the idea is to take the existing asset, as they call it, so you don't have to tear it down. Sometimes they do, when they do a mall retrofit, they'll actually tear it down, or they'll tear down and leave the big anchor building footprints, and those become, you know, some kind of a cool other use. And so you'll see mixed use going on, and one of the things we tried to do in the renderings are also just, you know, subtle hints at things that are important to you, that we heard were important to you as a community. So you'll see we've incorporated green roofs, and we've incorporated solar, and, you know, those sorts of things throughout, so that in, you know, even though there are specific recommendations on those topics, even the you know, pie in the sky pretty pictures contain some of these things that seem to resonate with the community. So you could imagine that'd be quite a different experience than the mall is right now. Hold on 1 second, I think I've got like 2 more slides, and then we'll do Q&A. So after tonight, we are, you know, you guys will go and read this this weekend, and you'll give comments back to the planning. I'm just kidding, you'll have a longer period of time, but you'll be so excited, at least all of you in this room will read this weekend. And you'll give comments back, and then staff will take the comments and consolidate them and give them to us, and we'll start working on the final draft of the plan, and then that plan will start through the adoption process, and you guys will adopt it, and it will become your official path forward and vision for the future. Comments, like I said, through March 15th, that's the date. So comments, you can still give comments through the 15th, and there we go, Q&A. Yes, sir.
In the mall?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Can you
we've
show-
got to come over to the mic, I think.
Could I just, I don't know if it's gonna work. We may have to switch back and forth. But could you either come up here, Gene, or if you're not able to do that, could you raise your hand and we'll bring you the microphone? The reason for that is this is being recorded. Hi, everyone. So that people can see you later.
In the mall diagram and on the board, I saw a feature that I'd never seen before, and I should speak about it a minute. There are 2 parking garages that you've shown around the mall to replace some of that flat parking, but they incorporate apartments, so you don't see them as parking garages.
Yes.
You see them as apartments.
Yes, that's one of the things that you'll find in thoughtful development is that, you know, at the end of the day, when you make a place like this, hopefully it'll be wildly successful and everyone will want to go there. Hopefully one day they'll all take transit or some other way than going in their car, but in the meantime, they'll, you know, go in a car and we need to provide parking. So one of the things that we can do when you're developing more densely like this, all of a sudden now you can justify the cost of parking garages. And so when we put the parking garage in place, we want to make sure that you can see the signs to it, but you don't have to see it. And so it happens within, so we can wrap it and stack apartments on it, condos, all kinds of things, so, yeah.
Are you contemplating above ground parking decks, or are you below ground? What are you contemplating here?
Neither. Just parking garages. And, you know, really at the end of the day, that's a great question. It's very specific, though. And so the comprehensive plan is just, the point being made is be more efficient with the land, develop it more densely, do those kinds of things. And then when the developer comes and is inspired to do that, then they do the studies and they go, oh, wow, it's way cheaper to do it underground, or, oh my gosh, like in Tennessee where we are, it's like, oh, 3 inches under the dirt is limestone. And so it varies. I'm sometimes shocked at the places that are able to do underground parking. It just seems like there's a big cost to it, but other places don't. So either way.
It used to be called Red Rocks Golf Course. There are rocks.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. I have a question of definition I need of a word that you kept using over and over. You kept using the word infill.
Oh, yes.
And I thought in the beginning that it meant the use of spaces that were blank or not used, but I don't think that's the correct definition.
Yeah, no, you took it the right way. Yeah, so the, like for instance, in the mall, we're infilling the parking lot. If you were to, walk down the street here, you might see that there's a building missing where there once was one, so we would infill in that location. Sometimes what you see, depending on kind of the community's perspective on it, some places are really, really committed to providing more housing choices for people. And so they may actually take an existing structure that was, like one larger building or like one house, and then divide the lot into two. And so therefore you now have two homes instead of one. Some places aren't as committed to providing more housing, and so they say, that scares me, that makes it feel more dense, and so we don't want to do that. So there are multiple definitions. It depends on the context, but in general, you took it the way that I meant it. Oh, it's defined in the plan, Anna just tells me.
Okay, it wasn't on
Perfect.
the board.
Ah, great, good job. Yes, ma'am? Okay.
Are you able to come?
Yeah, I can. Hi. In your plan, is there going to be, and you might have said this, any low to moderate income housing?
I hope so. That seemed to be something that was important to the community, and so I think there are probably many recommendations throughout the plan that address that. So I couldn't tell you exactly which page or whatnot, but it's important, so it's there.
Since most of the development will be private, Gary probably can answer this better than you can. What power do we have to guide development in that direction?
I'll go first if
Okay.
you want, and then
Sure.
you can see if I miss anything. All right, so typically what happens is you do the comprehensive plan, the plan of conservation and development that casts this long-term big vision. Hopefully it's a big vision and it's something to aspire to, nothing you can really super easily accomplish tomorrow. But most of what you see, to your point, where we've drawn and the investment would be private development. So a lot of times, especially in New England, we'll hear somebody say, how are we going to pay for all this? How are we going to pay for all this? And we say, oh, don't worry, right? All you have to do is allow for the people who own the property to either sell it or develop it themselves, and they'll go do most of it. There are some things, like I mentioned a road diet earlier, some of those things you would, probably be responsible for, but could be, I don't know if you guys do impact fees around here. Yeah, some states do impact fees, and so developers pay for making improvements. So, but the first thing you do after a zoning or after a comprehensive plan, it typically is update the zoning ordinance to support, at a minimum, support what's in the plan. And if you're really bold, you make sure that it, the things you see, not that plan or that plan or that plan, but plans that have all of these things in it that we've just talked about is required for new development. And so when somebody decides to develop their property, it's going to be developed in keeping with the big picture vision, not the specific plan. So like, the mall plan, for instance, or any of these plans that we have done, they're one of an infinite number of iterations that you could have done to create a wonderful, amazing, walkable, and mixed-use place. It just depends on who's drawing that day. But as long as you have the vision in place and the zoning in place, then there are certain rules and parameters that people will need to use.
Yeah, so Brian touched on what I was gonna say, so, and this is a good, I don't wanna say lesson, but this is a way for us to learn about what this plan is, right? So this plan lives as an official document that we share with the state, and the state requires us to have it. It's a visionary document, it's talking about where the community wants to go. And then from there, it's our job to create tools or utilize tools to implement that vision. One of those tools is the zoning regulations, like Brian mentioned. Planning and Zoning Commission owns those rules, right? So they own the plan, they also own the rules to try to implement that. So that's one of the tools. There are others as well, but that's the main, at least in New England and Connecticut, that's the main tool that we have. There are others, but I agree, yes, most of this is looked at as private development. But I will say that there are, I talk to developers on the phone regularly. There are concepts in some of these plans that people have brought up to me. And it's very helpful to be able to say to them, hey, by the way, we have this plan, here's what the community would like to see here, here's some ideas that the community would like to see, so that they can know. Developers are always interested in knowing, well, what does the town want? What does the town want to see? And it's hard for me to say by myself because I'm just one person. But through this community plan, that's a way that we can kind of communicate that.
Yeah, I mentioned when we were here for the Planapalooza that we are working in the other Manchester in New Hampshire. And we did their comprehensive plan, and they call it a master plan there, but same thing, conservation development. But there was a recommendation in there for them to update their zoning ordinance to be in keeping with and supportive of the plan. And so we're now in the process of writing their zoning ordinance to sync up with that. But the cautionary tale, though, we did the comprehensive plan for Lewiston, Maine, and I got a call from the planning director one day after we had done the plan and it was adopted. And he said, hey, you remember where you did that really cool drawing at that intersection and you did this and that and it was this urban farm and somebody just brought a proposal to me and they want to do a gas station with 15 pumps out front or whatever. What do we do? And I said, you can now go and show the community and the elected officials what happens when you don't update your zoning in time, because there's nothing you can do because the old zoning allowed it. So they had this great vision, this great drawing, great plan, everybody loved, it was done for. So.
Thank you. So I see that there's a lot that's going on with like mixed use and kind of like urban condensing. Are there specific age groups that the plan is interested in trying to bring to Manchester long-term to give them activities and kind of like getting them to stay for longevity purposes?
Yeah, I think as we were working on this, one of the things we heard about was really trying to make sure that it's multi-generational, and we're trying to, you guys have already done a nice job of when I come to meetings like this, there you actually have some young people in the room, which isn't always the case, especially in New England. And so that's nice. The thing that's wonderful about mixed use and some of these more dense options is that they work for all ends of the spectrum. They're not so great like when you got 3 little kids, but when you're younger, before you have that, and when you're older, it's great. And so that's one of the things that's nice about it, because most of what you have otherwise is sort of detached and family, and so you're already providing that, which most communities are. They're like, oh, we're afraid to densify or whatever, and I'm like, we're talking like 1/5 of your land area. I don't know what it is, made that number up, but a lot of times it's a very small percentile. But I think, we really do want to make sure the communities are vibrant and that there's something for everyone, I always say, and so that young people are here. And you don't lose the wisdom of age. When we were working in Londonderry, New Hampshire, we realized when you got to a certain point where you didn't want to or couldn't take care of your home or your property, or couldn't drive or didn't want to drive, that you literally had to leave town. they had nowhere for you to go. And I thought, man, that's horrible. You know, you live your whole life, now you have to leave. So they don't want that bad.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cesar. Now, I would point out one other thing in the plan, if you're a demographics person, if you look at the first chapter, one thing that we thought was really interesting that we tell people over and over is Manchester's relatively young compared to this region. So I think it's 4 or 5 years compared to the median age in Greater Hartford, which is, it's a real benefit. That doesn't mean that everybody's young, but to Brian's point, Connecticut and New England are aging. Well, we're not aging, everybody ages at the same time, right? So that doesn't make sense. But there are more older people staying and fewer younger people staying, right? So, but Manchester kind of turned that upside down. We do have a large and growing young population of families with young children and things like that. So sustainability-wise, that's really important in terms of the future of your community.
Could you just speak a bit more to the, could you just speak a bit more to the vision for transportation, especially with regards to kind of mass transit or public transit?
All right, you're getting detailed. It's been a minute. Anna, do you have some specific postulates you can share with us on transportation?
There's a transportation board in here. There it is.
Perfect.
Do you want me to read one, or just do you want me to show you the board?
Whatever works.
Okay. Well, I'll give you my favorite one, and you can take a look at this. My favorite one is the east of the river Connecticut Fast Track.
Ooh, yeah.
Thank you. All right, thanks. Rob is here, so I'll get some cheers for that. But so, if you look at Manchester, we're relatively underserved in terms of mass transit, right? You have the rail going up to Springfield, which is west of the river, right? You have the busway, the original busway, Connecticut Fast Track, going from New Britain to Hartford, and then lots of loops around that. But when it comes east, it really doesn't serve us as a community as well as it could. It goes to Buckland Hills, it goes to Spencer Street, but it doesn't serve downtown Manchester. We have densities here around downtown that supposedly support transit, which is great, but we don't have the transit. So that's one thing that's my favorite. There's plenty, but that's one thing that we can do is to communicate that to the state and to CROG and to elected officials and say, hey, that's one thing that we think is important.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Unlike Gary, I haven't memorized the plan. Who else? There's one in the back over there. Come on up.
Go Huskies.
This goes back a little bit to the question about low and moderate housing and brings in the question about youth as well. Does the plan contemplate accessibility to education for some of those areas, as well as ways to prevent a balkanization of neighborhoods by economic strata?
Are you searching? Remember what I said about not specific questions about the plan?
I apologize.
No, that's okay, I'm just kidding. Let's see. It's quite comprehensive, so the plan, that is. I would be surprised if most of the things that people are curious about aren't addressed in one way or the other. But as you go through and review it, what we want you to do is say like, oh yeah, this is great, we love it. But there's this other thing in here that, did that end up on the cutting room floor or whatever? So when you give your comments, if there's something that is missing, let us know about it. But the short answer to your question is I don't remember. Sorry.
Gary?
Can I try and take a stab?
Yes, please.
Come on, Stan. Here you go. Thanks. Great question. So I would just say in terms of, it kind of dovetails on Gary's last answer in terms of transportation.
Specifically, the CT Fast Track, Gary and I have always talked about if we got it downtown, connecting it to Yukon, which I think would be a home run. In terms of your question on balkanization of neighborhoods, which is a really good one, I think this plan, along with other things that we're trying to do as a town, is trying to actually connect our neighborhoods. And what I love about Manchester is that we have true diversity, not only demographically, but neighborhoods. You have neighborhoods that, it feels like you're in Glastonbury. You have neighborhoods like here where you feel like it's more like a urban atmosphere like Hartford. And I think contemplating that and connecting in a way that makes us greater than the sum of our parts is, this plan sort of calls for active transportation, a way in which it's easy to get from a neighborhood like this to Case Mountain, where you feel like you're in a completely different area. So I think ideally it's the opposite of that, and it's a connection. But it's a great point, and I think we got to be really intentional to make sure that we're not balkanizing. That's a great word. Our neighborhoods, especially when it comes to socioeconomic indicators and factors. So great question.
Yeah, good, thanks.
And I'll also just say, if you have specific questions like that and you want to talk more about it, our staff will be here, and you can talk to us afterwards or email us. We're happy to chat about anything, demographics or one of our neighbors. Before Gene goes again, is there anyone who hasn't asked a question that wants to? Okay, Gene. Third time's the charm.
Another transit question.
Okay. I'm gonna look at the poster. Look up.
I'm hoping that, a couple of years ago, I took a map of Manchester and I drew two loops, one in the north and one in the south, and they crossed over in the middle. And it would make a lot of neighborhoods that are outlying walkable to the center of town, because it would bring, find a way for people to get almost all over Manchester. So I'm wondering, is there any feasibility to have I guess it would be a Manchester-operated shuttle bus service with a couple of electric small buses that cruised around north and south.
Gary raised his hand.
It's kind of what Steve was talking about.
Sure, to some degree, yeah. So, and I would say that's a recommendation in the current and previous plan of conservation development, probably because Gene had something to do with that, right? And we did look into that, Gene. What we found was a local transit, a locally run transit authority of some sort is just pretty infeasible. So you have to be creative about how to help people get to what we call the last mile, right? You can get people to a location like Oakland Hills or downtown, but how do you get them past that? How do you get them home, right? So there's things that have come through since the last plan. Ride shares are big now, right? They were not big 10 years ago. Or Uber and Lyft and things like that. We're actually working with CROG right now, looking at a micro-mobility study here in Manchester, which you'll be hearing more about. Things like e-bikes, bike share, scooters, things like that, it may sound wild, but other places in the country have done them very effectively, and they do help people get around. So I'm not saying what you've asked is impossible, it's very difficult to do. I think we have to think a little bit more creatively about how we could do that in a manageable way. Yes.
I might have missed it, but how specifically do you provide specific comments to the plan?
How do you do it?
What's the mechanism?
Yeah, sure. That's a Gary question too.
So sure. So right next to Megan back there, that's Your Voice Matters on the main website. So and all these QR codes go right to that. So on that, you can access the plan and you can make comments directly that will go to us. You can also email us. You can, if you don't have our email, you can call the planning department, get our email addresses. It's online. Email us. Megan and I have cards here we can give you. So any of those ways, you're welcome to make comments. If you see us, if you talk to us tonight, we're going to write down your comment and get all of that to Brian and his team. So Hope that answers your question.
.807. I see no hands.
Okay. Well, let's give Brian a hand. Thank you very much, Brian. And Alan as well. And I want to thank everybody else one more time for coming out this evening. Like I said, our staff will be here. If you want to take a look at the posters, if you want to ask us about specifics or recommendations, we'll be here for a while. We will also be at the East Side Neighborhood Youth Center tomorrow from 8 to 4 pretty much all day if you're able to stop in there. Or if you want to call us or email or do any of those things I just mentioned, feel free to do that. We've got this 30-day period to hear from you, so we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much.